what I'm going to do is first of all show you a copy of the book that we're actually reading from, which is in fact, what is this book called? You're Doing What? Older Women's Tales of Achievement and Adventure. And the 4 women that are going to read are all in fact included within the book. What I'm going to do is, in organizing this today, is that first of all, I plan to tell you how the project came about. Then what I'm going to do is in fact introduce each of the people. They'll read their narrative from the book and you can ask questions. But I must tell you that we're or I'm doing the timing, I should say. So we have to move it along. And if there are more questions, I'm going to put on the chat actually how you can get the book. And also, in fact, I have a website and you can contact me on my website and I'll be happy to answer any kind of questions there too. So you can do it both ways. You can ask questions now, you can contact me on the website, whatever is best for you. The project, how did the project come into being? Well, in 2014, I took a hike. And actually, I went to Sedona with a group of people who are, as we say, older folks. And we went as a group. We hike as a group usually on Wednesdays when you can get out there. And we took this trip to Sedona. And on that trip, I should say, I did many things that I hate. I guess I didn't read the directions before, but I really don't like heights. I really don't like heights. I really don't like climbing up slip rock. There's a whole bunch of things I didn't like doing that I did. And each day when I came down and I was sort of intact, I got this idea eventually that why not, in fact, have older women basically talk about their lives that might be, in fact, somewhat different or dramatically different as mine was from my mother's life. So what I did is I put out an email to friends of mine that was an invitation to, in fact, write for this project. And I said, send the email out into the world, which is what people did. And within a few months, I think it was. So this was in 2014. Within a few months, I must have gotten about 130 responses. And then I thought, now what? So what I decided to do was actually, well, somebody approached me from a journal that is put out of the United Kingdom, out of the UK, and asked me if they could take some of these and put them in the journal. What happened, and I'm just going to cut to the short of this, what happened is that there are about 40 pieces in a journal out of the UK. And if you go to my website, which I'll put up again, you can, in fact, see how you can link to that journal. There are about 60 pieces in the book, and there are maybe 62, 63 pieces in the book, and there are a number, about 32, 33 on the website, so that there are, in fact, various, I should say, narratives from the people that, in fact, sent this in, various narratives that appear in different areas. And the people that are going to read today are all people that have contributed to the book. So I'm going to stop. I mean, there's more, but I'm going to stop with that. And I'm going to, in fact, introduce the first person, who is Betsy Chafcouloff. And I hope that you're seeing my screen because my intent is to show you this photo. If you can see it. So Betsy is the person that is on your left, right, which way? And the whole scenario will become clearer when she, in fact, talks. Betsy has been a speech and language pathologist, traveling on and off for almost 50 years, and is particularly drawn to working with people in Asia. When she was 68 years old, she started a nonprofit corporation, Speech Therapy Cambodia, that began by training neurologists in Cambodia. And this is Betsy's story. So, Betsy.
Hello. I'm Betsy. This is all something that took place in 2014, and I'll give you a very brief update after I read. So it was November 2013. Sovit was desperate. His 85-year-old father had been hospitalized in Phnom Penh, Cambodia after a stroke and could not eat because he could not swallow. He was losing weight every day and getting weaker. The family began making plans for a funeral. A very tech-savvy guy, Sovit searched the internet and discovered that speech therapists could treat swallowing problems. He Googled speech therapy and Cambodia, and he found me. How did I get here? Why Cambodia? Flashback 25 years to the late 1980s. I was an ESL teacher and had taught in Japan and was teaching international refugee and immigrant populations in San Francisco. At that time, a huge surge of Cambodian refugees had come into the United States, including to San Francisco. These people had spent 10 years in refugee camps in Thailand following the Khmer Rouge genocide from 1975 to 1979. Many were not literate even in their native language. In stepped the Refugee Women's Program, a volunteer organization in San Francisco. I became a volunteer literacy teacher with the program, tutoring Cambodian women in their homes. I became very attached to them and to their culture. The years passed, I changed careers, finishing a graduate degree in speech pathology in 2002 at the age of 56. I began practicing as a specialist in speech and swallowing treatment for adults and the elderly. Swallowing therapy has become a very important part of the speech pathologist's practice. Many people suffering from neurological disorders die from pneumonia and malnutrition caused by swallowing problems. But the right therapy techniques can help. The dilemma of Sovit's father is not unique. I didn't travel to Cambodia until 2008. Once there, I was fascinated to find 1,000,001 NGOs, most with a mission to serve the undereducated and others at risk. I thought I'd like to volunteer my services in Cambodia once I retired. For the next 5 years, I networked to explore this possibility. I must have corresponded with nearly 100 individuals and organizations during that period. Unfortunately, I found that there were very few speech therapy services in Cambodia and none at all for adults. In 2013, back in Cambodia, I met with some of the people I had corresponded with: educators, healthcare workers, audiologists, university administrators. I asked them, how can we bring speech therapy to Cambodia? There is a saying in Cambodia that there's always one woman in a village, not the most powerful woman, but someone that everyone listens to. One of my contacts was a nurse who works at a very large public hospital in Phnom Penh, the Russian hospital. Her name is Tavri, and she was this woman. Tavri spoke about me to the deputy director of the hospital, and a few months later, I was invited to volunteer. A friend in California suggested that I start a nonprofit corporation to fund my project in Cambodia, and this I did. Speech Therapy Cambodia was incorporated as a nonprofit public charity in 2013. In early 2014, I returned to Cambodia and once more started swallowing therapy training for 4 neurologists at the Russian hospital. They are a smart, young, and very enthusiastic group, very eager to help their patients. One doctor, Nara, told me, yes, I saw swallowing therapy when I was studying in France, but we don't know how to do it here. We have plans to organize a free speech and language clinic for the poor to start in the winter of 2014 and to expand services to other hospitals. Eventually, the goal would be to have the government agree to a university degree in speech pathology for Cambodians. I'll be traveling to Cambodia for the next 5 years, twice a year, for several months at a time to continue the training until we can establish a sustainable program run by Cambodians, the ultimate goal. I saw Sovit's father several times in 2013 and 14. He's still with us. He was then, he has since gone. The family is managing his treatment using techniques I taught them. I'd heard just lately that he's able to eat noodles again. And just a brief update. Thank you for listening to my story. This is more than 6 years ago, but now we are growing. We have 2 permanent speech pathologists who are Westerners who live in Phnom Penh and are doing their work year round. So I don't go very often anymore. I used to go twice a year for 3 months at a time. So I was away from home, I'm away from my husband who doesn't like the heat. So we now have 12 Cambodians who are able to treat swallowing disorders across 3 hospitals. So we did expand. And now anyone who comes to a public hospital for the poor in Phnom Penh can be treated and evaluated for swallowing disorders. We're also working with the Ministry of Health. We have an MOU ready to go, although things take forever to get accomplished in Cambodia, but the Ministry of Health likes our document. Now they're quibbling about our budget and what we're spending our money on. So, now with COVID-19, no one's going into the hospitals at this point, but we do have enough people trained who are independent Cambodians who are able to do the work without supervision. So we hope to get back into the hospitals as soon as possible to supervise again. Thank you.
So Eric, you can ask if anybody has questions.
Does anybody have any questions? Oh, looks like we have Lynn and then Susan. Lynn, you just have to unmute yourself.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you. Elizabeth, how do you do outreach in the rural areas of Cambodia, or do you?
That's a very good question. We've been trying all this time to do that. The big problem is that we train other medical professionals. We train nurses and physical therapists, and some doctors are also now being trained to do the work of a speech pathologist because there is no profession in Cambodia. The problem with the rural areas is that hospitals in those areas are extremely understaffed. So apart from Phnom Penh and a little bit in Siem Reap, there isn't much going on as far as hospital work. They're desperate for nurses, so they don't want us to take their nurses and train them to do something else and add to their workload. So there is something called the military hospital, which is kind of like our VA hospitals, and we really wanted to get into that system. So we wrote the same proposal that we have for the other public hospitals to them, and that was the answer we got. No, we can't keep up with our work as it is. So we're really counting on a university program. We have to have a university program and train Cambodians at that level so that they can actually go out and be speech pathologists, or at least in this area of swallowing, we're trying to do it incrementally.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Lynn. Susan, you're next.
Betsy, could you say a little bit about going there to do this work as an older woman? Did that make it easier because maybe they had respect for age, or?
Yep, it definitely did. They call me grandma, which is very honored. You know, so, and they say hi to grandma, baby, and things like that. I think it did. It gave me some gravitas, and they listened to me. And we have younger people there now, and that is an issue. We have a 37-year-old woman who looks like she's 23, and this has caused some issues with respect. We now have also a 42-year-old man, which is very, very rare in our profession, and he's the one that gets all the respect. So yeah, that's a good question.
Any other questions before we move on?
No, move on.
Oh, I just want to say, can I just say, I just say to Marge, I don't see your post on chat. So if you would post it again.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you, Susan. I got that.
Okay.
Thank you. The next person, thank you, Betsy. I didn't know Betsy. I don't. Most of the people that wrote for me, that wrote in this, I didn't know. And Betsy is one of those people that I didn't know. And here, Susie, just to make you happy, I'll do this so that I can write this note. But in a minute, okay. The next person, can you see this photo? I hope.
Yeah.
All right. I should say to you that, oh, wait, Nancy Rubin, I know you're on here. Nancy Rubin, I think you took this photo. Nancy took a number of photos that appeared in the book. And this wonderful one appears in color, but I must tell you that in the book it's in black and white. Anyhow, this is a photo of Helen Isaacson, of Helen taken by Nancy. And let me just say a word about Helen. Helen was born and brought up in Brooklyn, New York. She met her husband when they were both reporters for the student newspaper at Brooklyn College. They have lived a number of different places in the States and also in London. And they moved back to Berkeley, I think, after they both retired from teaching at the University of Michigan. Now, this photo really does, in fact, represent what Helen is going to talk about. So, Helen, you are somewhere there, Helen. I know you're there.
She's got to unmute.
No, she's
Helen,
here.
you're muted. Unmute yourself.
You have to unmute yourself, Helen. Hello, Helen.
Tapping, teaching, and fiddling. And of course, there's politics. I am the oldest by far in my tap dance class, 84. One of the greatest pleasures of my mature years is to put on my shiny black shoes and make music with my feet. When I was 4, my mother enrolled me in a ballet class, but after 3 years decided against my continuing. A cousin in the family had become a chorus girl. And this was not what my mother wanted for her only daughter. I was heartbroken. Dancing was what made me most happy. 30 years ago, when I was still teaching at the University of Michigan and feeling a bit too bound to the desk, to the books, and to the papers to grade, I decided I needed something to do physical. Could I possibly return to my childhood love of ballet? One adult ballet class taught me that far too many years had passed since I had been the star of my children's ballet class. Someone suggested I try tap. Even oldies like me can tap. The greatest legendary tappers died with their shoes on. When I moved to Berkeley after retiring, the first thing that I looked for was a dance studio. The second was a place where I could do volunteer work. I read that California had begun to spend more money on incarceration than on education. So I volunteered to teach women in a San Francisco jail. I taught in the jail's charter school. I helped in a program for women now separated from their children. And I started a peer tutoring service so that women who were accomplished in English or math could help those who were not. Then there were my violin lessons. Most of us grandmothers warn our grandchildren that they will be sorry later if they do not continue playing the piano or the violin. Recently, I decided to stop simply feeling sorry that I had given up the violin. I had my bow restrung and I found a teacher who seems to get a kick out of working with someone my age. Every day, well, almost, I fill away to learn anew the right way to place my fingers and hold my wrists. Most important, I try to do, as my teacher advises, make my own the piece I am playing. And for the sake of my grandchildren, I continue to be active politically in Grandmothers Against War. Every Thursday, 4 or more grandmothers hand out half-page leaflets explaining a current situation where citizen involvement might make a difference in creating a more peaceful world. We hope that those who take and read our words will use the toll-free telephone number we provide to call their congressional representatives and the president. Everybody knows that being active helps keep you alive. I would die of boredom if I didn't have lots to do. An update. Grandmothers Against the War found that we could no longer exist as a group due to many people going to retirement homes and many people dying. Even though some of us still do what we can when we can. As far as my taking tap and taking violin lessons, I still do so, but now online. As most of you know, the arts have been really badly hit by the virus, but so many of us have found that we can work online, and we do. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them.
Does anybody have any questions for Helen?
Okay,
All
no
right.
one.
Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, hold on. Betsy?
All right, excuse me, I just had to get up there for a second. The next person is Effie Hall Dilworth. And the photo that I have, that's Effie. She doesn't look like that now. That's her father, needless to say. This all becomes clear when she reads what she is going to in fact say. I should say one thing about what Effie's going to talk about. Effie's father was a paper son. I don't know if you know what paper sons are, so forgive me if I just say this a little bit. What happened is that when Chinese were in fact excluded from coming to the United States, one of the ways the Chinese young boys actually found a way in was through the paper son avenue. What that would mean was that connections would be made between China, people in China, and people in the States who in fact would claim, the people in the States would claim that this person was indeed their son that was living in China. So papers were filled out, forms were done, and these young boys would come into the States as, in quotes, paper sons. Effie's father was a paper son. And you'll hear more about that as she reads on. But let me just tell you a little bit. Effie graduated from UC Berkeley in English literature. She worked for the university for 30 years with the campus's natural history collections as a computer programmer and the administrator of a database system. In June 2013, the Chinese Historical Society of America published a booklet that her cousin Connie Young Yu and Effie wrote about the family's soy sauce enterprise, Wing Nian Brand, a story of longevity. And they had a wonderful party celebrating the publication of the book. So Effie, please.
Thank you, Marge. The year I was 68 years old, I learned these things about my father. He had two younger sisters, one of whom is still alive, living in Hong Kong. This sister has three sons, one in Cupertino, an hour away from me, the other two in Hong Kong. He had an older half-brother who had two children. He had a younger half-brother whom he never met, who has two children. All of them live in Guangzhou, China. He had 25 cousins who were the children of his father's three brothers and one sister. His father was married 3 times. My father and his sisters were the children of the second wife. Pop, as my sibs and I called our father, told me that he came from China by himself as a young boy and lived with an uncle in Needles, California until he graduated from high school. One uncle, not a word about parents, brothers, sisters. It is a year later now. I have been to Hong Kong, Guangzhou, Cupertino, and Los Angeles, and have met the children of my father's sister, my first cousins. I met the uncle who was the younger of my father's 2 half-brothers and his children who are technically my half-first cousins. Our grandfathers are one and the same, but my grandmother was his second wife while their grandmother was his first wife. The grandson of my father's older half-brother, progeny of my grandfather's first wife, and I have become comrades in our efforts to fill in the blanks about our father's families. It is an amazing thing to discover the existence of aunts, uncles, and cousins, closely related kin, when you lived so long thinking your father was nearly an orphan. My first step was a phone call to a man living in Needles who might possibly be a relative. Indeed, he was a distant cousin. Then I spoke to his older sister. From there, I met by telephone the cousin who had been amassing family stories and pictures for the last 8 years, beginning with his father's reminiscences. I was not a child when my father died. I was 21 and he was 58. But my memories of him focused on his having been a loving, understanding parent. Now I aim to learn whatever I could about him, about his background. What did his extended family know about him? As it turns out, not much. They'd heard that they had a relative in San Francisco who'd started a soy sauce factory. Only one uncle I spoke to had ever met him. So over the course of this year, I learned quite a bit about my father's people, if not a lot about my father. But a larger theme has emerged: clan, blood, family. I didn't expect to be turning over these notions at this point in my life. My siblings, my father, my mother and her siblings, their children, that was family that did not bear thinking about. They were ingrained in my childhood. But my ready acceptance of people I'd met so recently, the familiarity I felt simply because they were identified as family, this mystifies me. And the strength of such a bond, even when it is just the thickness of a thread, astonishes me. My father, Yu Yunglern, was born in 1908 in a village in Canton, China. When he was 12, his parents bought a paper from a Chinese-American citizen named Ham Hong, documenting the existence of a 10-year-old son named Ham Hall. My father assumed the identity of this boy and came to America with Mr. Ham in 1921. He was now presumed to be a citizen of the United States. After a brief stay with Mr. Ham's family in Arizona, Ham Hall joined his uncle in Needles. Ham Hall took the name George Ham Hall soon after his arrival in this country. This was my father's American identity. My parents deliberately created the silence around the subject of his family to hide the fact that he had entered the country illegally. The possibility of being deported, were this discovered, shadowed him until the last 3 months of his life when he received a green card. So that's the end of what I wrote. And I want to say that it was in, I think 2000, I can't remember, 13 or 14, that my brother, my sister and I, we booked tickets actually to go to Hong Kong to meet my father's sister. And I think it was a month or two before before our flight was taken off, she died. It was such a shock. And we decided we would go to Hong Kong anyway and meet her sons. And it turned out to be wonderful, really wonderful. And I'm still in touch with one of the Hong Kong cousins and the one in Cupertino. So well, it's interesting. I mean, the family connection, it goes on. So,
Effie?
thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Effie?
I want Effie to say a little more how it was so secret in your family. I thought for a long time that no one knew he was a paper son, but people knew he was a paper son in your family, but nobody, but how did that go?
You know, paper sons were really, really common in Chinatown. And so it didn't have to be a secret in the community or among, you know, in the family.
But they didn't know anything about his past.
You know, I don't know. That's a good question. I suspect they did. I'm sure my mother must have told, for instance, told her sisters, you know, what the story is, what the story was.
Mm.
So, you know, I want to add one little fact, which is that Chinese were excluded as of 1882. And it was because of the 1906 earthquake and fire, when all the you know, birth records were destroyed. That's when the Chinese in this country, legally or illegally, started to claim family in China, because there were no records to disprove them. So that's how it worked out.
Thanks, Effie.
Looks like Agnes has a question.
Yes, are you going to write, are you writing more of this? Or are you going to, it'd be a great memoir.
Oh, you know.
Oh, please. When it ended, I thought, I want to know more. There's so much more to know.
Well, you know, my dad, he you know, he started the soy sauce business, and it became very successful. And so, in fact, I kind of feel like, you know, writing this little booklet with my cousin about the soy sauce factory, that's, you know, I think that's the story he would have wanted told. So no, you're right. I haven't thought more about, you know, more writing.
Well, where can we get the booklet?
You know, it was published by the Chinese Historical Society of America in San Francisco, and I'm not sure it's still in print, but you know, I'm not, so check with them. And actually, go on, Marge, what?
Agnes, you can borrow it from me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But if there's another way, you know.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the Chinese Historical Society would love the business.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
thank you for being interested.
Yeah.
Susie.
There was the other night on PBS, part of the series on Asian Americans, and one of the women in that program talked about her father, and some officials, maybe the FBI, or it's not clear to me what they were, came to ask at some point about the father, and they were very worried that their story would come out about the father being a paper son. So two questions. Did your father use the adopted name for his whole life?
Yeah.
And were they also, did you ever get any sense that they also were worried about the authorities coming to check, or?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
You know, I was enrolled in 3 different Chinese schools. And apparently the way immigration had to check up on the legality of your parents was to see if your American name matched up with your Chinese name, your Chinese school name. And so I was taken out of 3 different schools because immigration was coming around each time. So yeah, definitely. It was a real fear.
Thanks, Effie.
Well, I just wanted to tell you that you would also be interested to know that my father acted like an American citizen. He voted. And he never missed an election.
You probably could use them. Thank you.
Looks like Marge, looks like Lynn has a question.
Effie, I was just so touched by your story, and it couldn't help but bring to mind what immigrants are going through right now. And I'm sure you have a particular sensitivity to that
Sure.
than what your family has gone through. So thank you so much for writing it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, the last person then to read is somebody that I have never met except via this Zoom conferencing, but I have wanted to meet her for a long time. So, I mean, seriously, folks, you get a photo like this in a story that you're going to hear, and you say to yourself, I would really like to meet this person. So,
Yeah.
let me introduce you to Christie Batterman-Jordan, who is an art historian and glass artist who founded a company that became one of the largest international suppliers of decorative glass. She balances her love for the arts with a passion for nature and tries to spend as much time outdoors as possible, hiking, gardening, birding, and scuba diving. Christie, it's all yours. You can explain the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. Well, first I'd like to say thank you to Marge for pulling us together. She's been so smart and so supportive. It's been such a pleasurable project, and I've so enjoyed meeting all the other authors on Zoom, right? Hopefully someday we can gather in person. So today we're going to go to the ocean. And I'm going to assume that a lot of you have been snorkeling. Maybe some of you have been scuba diving. You're going to hear how I took up scuba diving when I was 55 and took up mermaid scuba diving. I was 65. So this is a story about my life as an aging mermaid sex goddess, which is certainly nothing I ever expected I would ever be, right? So here we go. I am perched on the edge of a sailboat, about to glide my legs into the clear Caribbean water. It's tricky though. My legs are encased in a silver mermaid tail. Below my feet, a wide, solid fin spreads gracefully, but it's heavy and difficult to move. My tail fin needs to cut through the surface at just the right angle. Otherwise, I'll belly flop, ruining the scene. At the age of 65, I am being filmed as a mermaid sex goddess. Ooh. Right. Most professional mermaids, I have learned, are freedivers, able to hold their breath for up to 4 minutes, supported by an off-camera crew with air supplies. But I am alone on a sailboat with my new, brilliant European boyfriend. He with the surprising and unexpected mermaid fascination. Planning to film a 30-minute mermaid story full of pirouettes and flirtations amid the coral reefs. I'm wearing a scuba tank with 60 minutes of breathable air. Do I feel sexy? A bit, but being underwater has always made me feel uneasy. My parents were New Yorkers, indoor intellectuals, and my father never learned how to swim. My mother loved being with friends on a beach, but I never once saw her put a toe in the water. I may have stayed on the beach too, if I hadn't given birth to 2 sons in my early 40s. By the time they were teenagers, only adventure sports like scuba diving kept them enthusiastic about family vacations. We took to diving like a family of fishes, working our way through the levels of certifications during enjoyable weeks traveling the world. We swam through underground caverns in Yucatan, around icebergs in Alaska, with manta rays, turtles, seahorses, and bioluminescent jellyfish, thrilled to be exploring the oceans. So, when my new boyfriend suggested diving in the British Virgin Islands as a mermaid, I was excited. We commissioned a custom mermaid wetsuit with a special monofin to hold my feet in the tail. Then he dropped the challenge bomb. Can you dive without a buoyancy compensator? That's the vest recreational divers wear, which works like a fish's swim bladder. By adjusting its air content, you can stay comfortable and relaxed at any depth. But wearing a bulky vest would cover my breasts and destroy his mermaid illusion. Without my trusted diving vest, it would be up to my swimming skills alone to keep me positioned underwater for the camera. And now, here I am in the Caribbean, on a sailboat anchored in a shallow cove, palm trees gently swaying in the tropical breeze. I take a lingering last look at the sky and slip the silver tail into the water, and am instantly disoriented by the experience of trying to swim with my legs held firmly in place. I am sinking fast to the sandy bottom, 25 feet below. So far, nothing sexy at all about this experience, I think, as the air bubbles flow upward while I lie like a giant silver sardine flopping on the ocean floor. In the meantime, my lover, who has been filming my entry, has joined me on the bottom, great concern showing in his eyes. And well justified that concern is, since I have left all of my wits at the surface. Finally, after a long interval of measured breathing and feeling calm, I lift my shoulders and kick firmly off the bottom. Oh, what a ride. As I remember how to dolphin kick with my legs, my tail moves so swiftly that the coral sails by. I swim up or down gracefully, starting a sensual rocking motion by pulling my shoulders back and urging my waist forward. My hips follow in one long wave. My tail echoes the rhythmic rocking of my hips. It propels me through the water. Fish swim by, seeming to welcome me as one of their own. Sunbeams sparkle around me, and I lift my head to see light dancing on the surface above. Gently kicking and bending backward, I make a perfect circle somersault, effortless and weightless, gliding with one smooth motion. Reaching my arms forward and legs back, I stretch out the full length of my tail and ride happily in the warm water towards a soft, sandy clearing in the coral reef. Breathe. Settling into the sand, I am framed by sea fans and coral. Angelfish and a multitude of colorful tropical fish glide by, nearby, like jewels in the water. My lover's eyes are smiling behind his video camera, about 20 feet away. He swims in ever closer circles, his lens holding the mermaid in tight, loving focus. I run my hands across my breasts, then blow a kiss to him and his camera.
Wow, that's cool.
So let me give you an update. This gentleman is a nuclear physicist, and we married, right? So I am a 72-year-old newlywed, which is really quite wonderful. And we are exploring, you know, a new way of being married in the 21st century. He has his house, I have my house, right? It's just completely wonderful. And I can't even begin to tell you how many of my friends have said, ooh, you know, they wish they could do that too. I'm retired, he's not. So he's, you know, working long, long hours, many days a week. So we see each other on weekends, which is absolutely perfect. He's also a pilot. We have 4 airplanes, so we go flying around. It's really just a perfect life. In terms of trying to make the world a better place, I've been very active in a group called Reef Check, which is concerned about the health of the coral reefs in the ocean. As you know, the coral reefs are really deeply, deeply challenged, and the prognosis is not favorable. I do seem to be drawn to water. My passion is teaching people about the depletion of groundwater globally, which of course lends itself to problems with food security. However, that's a story for another day. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this, and I really want to welcome all of you to get out and explore the oceans.
Any questions?
Yeah, Lynn?
You have to unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Is this good?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Christie, do you see that the problem that the virus has presented us is a possibility for changing what we are doing to the oceans, for instance, and the coral and the plastic that's going in? Do you see any signs of hope that the difficulty we're in with this has some sort of aligning?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, but my off the top of my head answer would be no. We certainly are seeing a reduction in air pollution. I mean, I think yesterday there was an article about how, you know, carbon monoxide emissions are down 17%. So, you know, that's very good. But, you know, the true danger to the coral reefs and the oceans are pesticide and insecticide runoffs, right? And certainly agriculture may be slowing down in terms of harvests, but, you know, it's not slowing down in terms of trying to get crops in the ground. Overfishing is just a tremendous problem. I want to recommend a movie called End of the Line. It's predicting that the oceans are going to be depleted of fish by 2040. I mean, it's very, very bleak. You know, I'm sorry to be bringing this stuff up today when, you know, hopefully we want to have a happy time. In terms of the plastics, one thing I've noticed, at least in the daily life of my family, is we seem to be using more disposable packaging.
Yeah.
And I've seen the restaurant news about, you know, the restaurants opening in different states. They're using plastic forks, you know, they're using disposable utensils, plates. So actually, unfortunately, in terms of the health of the ocean, I don't think that the COVID shutdown is going to have a measurable positive effect. I wish it were so.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Nancy?
It's not a question, but, and I assume you know about this, but if not, I did hear on the radio, NPR, and we always know they're correct. I did hear yesterday that they have found something that will grow on coral and is protecting coral from bleaching. So that's a new discovery. Do you know about this? I don't
know about that particular one. I know that there's a lot of experiments going on, and a lot of people are trying to regenerate coral, and there are a lot of very promising techniques. The problem is funding and scale. You know, I mean, it's all, the coral reefs are just absolutely enormous, and the damage is enormous. And I've been diving, for example, the reef that goes along Yucatan, down Central America, and then across the top of South America. That's the second largest coral reef in the world after, you know, the Australian Great Barrier Reef. The bleaching there is unbelievable.
Terrible. I've
I
seen-
mean, it is just unbelievable. I mean, you're talking about coral that is bright white. I mean, it's just, you know, it's as white as this paper. It's shocking, right? So I think that a lot of scientists are trying to do what they can. There is not a lot of funding for it, unfortunately. And then again, the question is, how do you scale this up?
And I have one other comment, which is I gave up scuba after one unfortunate incident
Oh, I'm
that
sorry.
took my life, but I was a really devoted snorkeler, barrier reef, everywhere you can think of.
Yeah. Oh,
And
it's
I must
wonderful.
say, I have to thank you for your description because I can no longer snorkel. Just last year, just gave it up, hung it up. So I just have to tell you how happy I was to have your description to bring back what I love the most.
That's good.
Yeah, thank you. I do want to say that, of course, we can snorkel, you know, at any age, and almost everything that's interesting to see in the ocean, unless you're a scientist and have other interests, is in the first 20 to 40 feet. And certainly with good visibility, you can see down 20 feet when you're snorkeling. And should you know anybody who's a diver, or should you be thinking that you might take it up yourself, don't think you're too old. I've been diving with people in their late 80s. It's really wonderful because once you get in the water, you're weightless. Now, it's true, you're wearing 100 pounds of equipment. If you dive in cold water, you're wearing 100 pounds of equipment. In warm water, you're wearing 50 pounds of equipment. And even that, it's hard to stand up and walk. You know, it takes two guys to carry me like in the water. But don't hold back. Get out in the oceans and enjoy them as much as you possibly can.
Thank you. Thank you. I sent a couple messages on chat, how you can get the book, how you can get in touch with me. And if you have questions for any of the participants, I'll pass it on to them and they can get back to you. Also, Betsy's project, which has its own website, which I think that you might be interested in also. I think that's it. I really appreciate everybody. I want to say one thing also about this book and also about the whole project. I don't want you to think it's only people that can physically do extraordinary things that wrote in for this book and the project. There's a woman that wrote who, in fact, has had rheumatoid arthritis since she was in her 20s. And one of the things that she writes about is how she has adjusted her life, in fact, dealing with that rheumatoid arthritis, and in ways that previous generations necessarily couldn't do. So there's a whole range of what people have written about. And I just would like you to know that. I thank you, Eric, for, in fact, putting up with us and having us.
No, always.
And thank you, everybody, for coming, too. Eric, I don't know if you have any final words or anything.
No, I just wanted to thank everybody. I really appreciate it. It was a great group today. I learned a lot, and it was a really great hour. So I just want to thank everybody for reading. And I want to thank everybody for showing up today. We're really happy to have Marge and her crew. So thank you, everybody, for being here today.
Okay.
And thank you, Marge.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Marge.
Oh, thank you, Betsy. Thank you, Agnes. Thank you, everybody.
And Eric, thanks for welcoming us.
Good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Effie. Thank you, Effie, for staying the whole time.
Thanks, Marge.
Yeah, well, have a great day, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. That was
Thank
great.
you. Okay.
It was great.